Final Fantasy XIV takes a long time to catch up to endgame for new players. In a recent interview, Yoshi P talked about working on a story skip feature to speed that process up. It would likely send players straight into patch 6.1, just after the finale of Endwalker. I've seen a lot of people having all kinds of takes, and there's a surprising amount of negativity. I wanted to share why I think that this would ultimately be a good thing for the game. First off, it's important to note that while they are working on the feature, they haven't decided on if they're actually going to release it once it's done, so they're taking this matter very seriously. The reason that they're doing this is because catching up takes a ton of time. Think about how long it would take if you went through the entire game, starting with the Realm Reborn, all the way up until patch 6.55, the very last story patch of Endwalker. There's a ton of cutscenes, dialogue, and walking around that you have to do. For most people, it would probably take a few months, assuming you have a few hours a day, in addition to more time to spend on the weekend if you aren't using that time for other things. This can really be daunting, and for many, not worth it, especially if your goal is to play with your friends. Today, if I ask my friend to play a game, it usually just involves downloading it and playing it. If I told them that it would take over 100 hours to really play together, they'd probably just laugh at me. Now obviously, the story itself has appeal for a lot of people, and especially our dedicated community that loves it so much. I would never want to miss out or skip through the story of Final Fantasy XIV, and I certainly think that if someone does, they're missing out on a wonderful experience. That said, I know it's not for everyone. There are plenty of people who give up on Final Fantasy XIV because of how long it takes. You have to consider how it feels going through the story as a new player. They don't get the pacing that current players do, where we wait 2 years for an expansion and 4 to 5 months between post-launch patches. It's a much more digestible experience, even if many of us would probably prefer to have less time between updates. And if someone quits because they got burnt out, there's no story for them to experience at all now, is there? They're also probably never coming back. Now for the pushback I'm seeing, some say that the story is meant to be experienced properly by consuming all of it, and that the game simply isn't for you if you don't want to go through it all. It leans into this feeling of preserving the intended experience of the art, and while I do agree that it is the best way to experience Final Fantasy XIV, it isn't the only way. I don't think that it ultimately has any impact on your own experience if others don't care about the story as much as you do, and I think that people are really struggling to accept this. It almost starts to feel like you're gatekeeping the enjoyment of others if you force them to enjoy things only in one way. If someone that you don't know skips the story, it has almost zero impact on you. Not to mention there are ways to skip the story now anyway. The most you'll feel it is that the community has a large uptick in people who don't know or understand major plot points in the story. If you care about community interaction on places like Twitter or Reddit, where you like discussing the story, maybe this gets kind of annoying. But I can say that this is a good enough reason to not include it. Chances are, those people aren't spending time talking about the story anyway. And besides that, the story is so long and spread out over so many years that people often get into debates while forgetting major plot points all the time. I do think that it's a magical experience to know that everybody around you has gone through the same journey, but in some ways, it's a little delusional, if only because it's easy to forget that many people actually skip through cutscenes and don't care at all now. Some people just log on to raid and that's their choice. It makes no difference to me. We also aren't seeing those around us who couldn't make it through because they got bored at slower points of the game. As important as the story is, there's a lot more to the game and some people are really just losing sight of this. We also have to remember that this game has a rough start. It's been improved a lot, sure, but we're now witnessing 10 years of collective writing experience on the team, and we may be in for a story that hits even harder than the last arc did. Even if skippers miss out on the beginning of the Warrior of Light, they still have the chance to experience this new journey with all of us together. And who knows, maybe one day they'll find themselves enjoying the newer stories so much that they go back to try out New Game Plus. The other major talking point I've seen is that people will be thrown into Endgame without knowing how to play the game. This one is kind of weird, because I feel like if you participate in the endgame now, you don't exactly have the highest expectations for the average player as it is. The game is also just too easy for me to worry about people struggling with story trials. Even then, we get what, only 3 per expansion launch anyway? Facing a little hardship and friction won't hurt you. Not to mention, duty support means that you can always run with NPCs if you find yourself having a hard time running dungeons with newer players. As far as the actual endgame content is concerned, like extreme trials and savage raiding, it's not like things are perfect now anyway. There are so many players who have been playing for years that can't be bothered to try and learn and improve with their job of choice. If anything, players using catch-up methods will have more pressure to watch guides and learn than current players. Some of them will be just as worried about it as veterans are. And who's to say that as a part of doing this process, Square won't be thinking about all of these concerns as well, and what to do about them. I expect that if we get a feature like this, we get things to help players who are just now catching up, like how they've been working on the Unending Codex a lot during Endwalker, which helps to explain various major plot points in the story right now. It would be nice to see some sort of tutorials or help requests to get affiliated both with endgame mechanic visuals as well as the job kits once you have all of the skills. Right now, if you want to learn a lot about the game, you have to dive into Discords and YouTube, and while these resources can be great, it's much better when you can learn some of these things without leaving the game. Tooltips are nice, but there's a lot of work required for someone to understand how to best combo some of the skills together. The game could make this a lot easier with deeper explanations that wouldn't fit in the tooltip. We've already seen some of this in the form of the modern job quests. While not perfect, the intro quest of the Sage job gives people a good idea about how some of the basics of the job works. I also do hope that they take the opportunity in Dawntrail to add more auto button combos for skills that always have to happen in a certain order anyway. And speaking of Dawntrail, it's right around the corner, and I'm sure that Square has data on how many people probably started during Endwalker only to quit without making it past the Realm Reborn. They probably want that to happen a lot less. Even if we do get a feature like this, there's no reason to believe that it would come out at the same time as an expansion launch. Square could give veteran players the ability to experience the story with the current player base first. Then, they could release the story skip a little bit later, giving people plenty of time to catch up without the overwhelm of playing on launch day. I think that a lot of people are kind of gatekeeping a feature that will get more people into the game for no reason. We only stand to benefit from having more people around enjoying the game and doing stuff in it, and if you want to hear me talk about why, check out my video on why I think that Final Fantasy XIV feels a lot lonelier than it should. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.